The Indian film industry is still dominated by the so-called star structure that was prevalent in Hollywood till the early 2000s. With IP-driving content, Hollywood has seen a changing trend in the star structure that brought audiences to the ticket booth for decades. In the recent past, and in particular the last decade, star power in Hollywood got limited to the IP the actor is associated with. Movies outside of franchises with those same stars fared poorly or bombed. This structural changes contributed directly to how studios brand their movies in Hollywood, taking away most of the power from the stars. Even the stars of yesteryear deliver hits only in movies that either have a nostalgic flavor or have been running on the franchise model. But closer home, Indian movies, and in particular popcorn fare coming out of the Hindi film industry, still pride and worship the star system. Movies driven on content fare relatively poorly in comparison to the star-driven vehicles. In the past 5 years, an average of 8 movies out of the top 10 highest grossers of the year were star-studded vehicles. And we're not even taking Shahid Kapoor's Kabir Singh or Ayushmann Khurrana's Andhadhun or Badhai Ho as star-studded vehicles. So why do Bollywood movies, which are either cringeworthy or defy logic, taking such exorbitant numbers at the box office? How do such mindless movies without a coherent plot or a story or a noteworthy performance get away with creating nothing short of trash? Here are 5 reasons on why we think that Bollywood gets away with bad films. Number 5. The audience's undying love for celebrity culture. Call it the good life or the aspiration of a billion-plus population, a movie star in India is treated no less than a god. With milk baths, prayer offerings, and undying devotion, the audience in India shower immense love for the superstars. They love their movies and celebrate their releases irrespective of the quality of product. The fascination with the star system has propelled movies such as Race 3, Baghi 2 to gross more than Andhadhun or Badhai Ho in the same year. But what is it exactly that drives people to watch these star-studded movies? Is it the acting or the content in the movie? Is Baghi 2 high on content, or did Salman Khan's acting chops in Race 3 define new acting standards? None of that. Just having stars drive a movie on a month-long marketing extravaganza helps boost a movie's box office numbers. Audiences go in huge numbers to the theaters, making such movies big hits. A part of the money so made is reinvested in making another bad movie. A month before the release, the stars basically take over the media and the lives of an average moviegoer, from being seen in interviews, talk shows, TV shows, newspaper, social networks, advertisements all at once. The audiences are constantly reminded that in a few days a blockbuster will be released. Add to that the media outlets and PR agencies already predicting the hundreds of crores that the movie will make, and add a remake song that will play out in every club for a month or two. This upcoming release basically takes over your life and in turn dominates every conversation. This then eclipses all the smaller films that have a better story or a better content or a performance so endearing that it would leave a lasting impact on the eyes and minds of a moviegoer. The undying love for celebrities we adore stem from an unconscious bias that we foster within us for films that these stars act in. And that bias is inflated by the media houses and other advertising mediums such as social networks, YouTube, blogs, fashion, etc. We close ourselves from exploring new ideas and make our mind up towards the trash that is delivered to us in the form of cinema. As audiences, we are afraid to venture into the unknown, to experiment, and hence we settle down for less than mediocrity, something these stars and their movie entourage process year after year. And this happens because the audience has a thirst for such insane profanity, a vicious cycle that will be very difficult to break. And in that attempt, it is us, the audience, who in small ways drive bad movies to make magic numbers, and where good talent and good movies are lost somewhere in the rubble, waiting to be discovered in a list of hidden gems years later. At number 4, fear of experimentation. Ask yourselves, when was the last time you saw a sci-fi movie in Bollywood? How many good action movies has Bollywood produced in the last 10 years? How many horror movies, fantasy, thrillers? Compare this to the genre-based films Hollywood produces year after year, from adventure movies to big spectacle sci-fi, from indie thrillers to breakout horror game changers, from musicals to comedies. Hollywood provides its audiences a wide plate of options to choose from. And if you think that genre films are made only in Hollywood, watch the kind of action films, thrillers, sci-fi, fantasy, war films that come out from international cinema outside of Hollywood. Indian cinema, and most importantly Bollywood or the Hindi film industry, has mostly shied away from experimenting with different genres. The top directors are comfortable with their own style of filmmaking. Sanjay Leela Bhansali is known for magnum opus dramas since Ram Leela, and he has made it his forte. J.P. Datta in his prime was known for war films. Take Imtiaz Ali, known for making road movies with romance as a backdrop. Almost all his movies are about love and being on a journey, leaving aside a few directors who have played around with experimenting, such as Vikramaditya Motwane, Dibakar Banerjee, Rakesh Om Prakash Mehra, and Anurag Kashyap, just to name a few, a large population of movies are made with a similar template. Rarely do we see a movie such as No Smoking, LSD, Mard Ko Dard Nahi Hota, Detective Vyomkesh Bakshi. Why is it that directors rarely venture out of the usual? To understand better, let us cite a few examples. A recent superhero movie, a rarity in Indian cinema, titled Bhavesh Joshi's Superhero, released in 2018 to mixed reviews, but it only managed to gross less than 1.5 crores while it was made on a 21 crore budget. Starring Harshvardhan Kapoor and directed by Vikramaditya Motwane, this movie wasn't exactly groundbreaking, but it was gritty enough to showcase a common man's journey to becoming a superhero. Something like a Batman without the tech and the money, or Daredevil only he does not have the extrasensory capabilities. Yet moviegoers simply ignored this movie and went for Veere Di Wedding instead. Veere Di Wedding grossed close to 140 crores. Another high-concept superhero kung fu theme movie, Mard Ko Dard Nahi Hota, grossed only 2 to 3 crore in its lifetime, while it was made with 12 to 17 crores. It is understandable that in terms of competition, it had Kesari starring Akshay Kumar, but audiences turned a blind eye to the release completely. We have seen many movies which release in the same week do relatively well, but that wasn't the case here. Even Yash Raj Films' experiments with Titli, a crime thriller produced by Dibakar Banerjee, only was able to make 2 crores. Leave directors. Audiences even reject experimental movies made by stars. Take Saif Ali Khan in Lal Kaptan. Fresh off the success of Sacred Games, Saif starred in this fresh, westerner-themed revenge thriller which could not even make 10% of its budget. Even Akshay Kumar, who was fresh off the success of Sing is King, Welcome, Bhul Bhulaiya, failed to attract audiences in his experimental feature directed by Nagesh Kokuno in 2009, 8x10 Tasveer. This movie was a commercial failure upon release. A brand name such as Nagesh Kokuno, whose Iqbal broke new grounds in cinema, could not attract the audiences. Pataka, Masan, Bhavesh Joshi, Lal Kaptan. These are just a few examples where experimentation failed to resonate with the audiences and were rejected downright. Films of Sushant Singh Rajput such as Kai Poche, Son Chiriya, Detective Vyomkesh Bakshi are groundbreaking in their own way. But audiences have only started going back to them now. These were also rejected by the masses upon release. So to understand why directors, even the most daring ones, hesitate in making a different movie, it's simple. They do not get the support from the audiences they make these movies for. Which brings us to our third point, lack of funding. If a movie, no matter how many awards or applauds it gets, does not manage to recover even the cost, let alone make a profit, producers will definitely go elsewhere. And that opens the Pandora's box of trash that Bollywood repackages every time with glitzy sets and colorful costumes. Movies such as Dabangg 2 and 3 make hundreds of crores. Most of Salman Khan movies in the recent past, except Bajrangi Bhaijaan and to a mild extent Sultan and the Tiger series, are poorly made films. Yet these movies laughed all the way to the bank. The same can be said of Tiger Shroff films. Yes, the action is good, copied at times, but the actor does put in efforts in his action sets. That may warrant a fan base, but the astronomical money Bagi series has made cannot explain the lack of logic in the films. Yet the Indian audiences went in huge numbers. Same thing can be said of the Houseful series. Now let's say a producer who backs a film like Bagi decides to experiment and give a bold new story a backing. A movie with new actors and a new director with fresh perspectives. Alas, such a movie is rejected downright in most scenarios. Case in point, Shaitan, directed by Bijoy Nambiar. With a budget of close to 12 crore, the film managed to gross less than 12 crore. Also, there is this agreed upon law in the Hindi film industry that the risk is mitigated when a film stars an established name versus a newcomer, unless the newcomer is already famous, let's say a star kid. This is evident from our earlier point where on an average, 8 of the top 10 films of the past 5 years were established star vehicles which included movies led by the three Khans, Akshay Kumar, Ajay Devgan, Hrithik Roshan, as well as younger talent such as Ranbir Kapoor, Ranveer Singh and Varun Dhawan. Only in a rare instance did we have a Tannu Weds Mannu Returns, a MS Dhoni or Hichki feature in the top 10 movies of a year in terms of collections. Also, a producer who has made a good film might find it difficult to spend huge amounts of money in advertising given the historical box office performance of such films. In all fairness, we may go on to blame the directors and actors for not making quality films. But as audiences, we are also responsible for the sorry state of affairs. A big example would be Shah Rukh Khan and Ashutosh Gowarikar Swades. Shah Rukh Khan, then the biggest Indian movie star, and Ashutosh Gowarikar, fresh off the Oscar-nominated Lagan, made a beautiful film that was so relevant to the times we live in. However, audiences rejected that movie. By ignoring good films, we are leaving the film industry to churn out the bad films year after year. But why is it that audiences lap such bad movies? Why do these movies make so much money where good quality films with a new story are not watched in theaters? That brings us to a second point: lack of exposure to good content. Most Indian audiences grew up watching Indian movies copied from Hollywood or the South, as well as from South Korea. Rarely have we seen originals that gave the Indian audiences good content. Even the remakes or copies were done to suit Indian sensibilities, where a romantic angle, unnecessary dance song was added. Also, access to international cinema was scarce. People in metro cities had access to some of the content made worldwide. Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities in the country had far less knowledge and resources to access such cinema. Knowledge of good content was not provided for, and most producers in Bollywood took advantage of that scenario. Remaking classics such as Reservoir Dogs, Usual Suspects, and Unfaithful was business as usual. Weak copyright laws made that possible for most producers. And why not? Investing in a new story was a much bigger risk than taking a successful movie and remaking it. Partner, Badshah, Black, Murder, Zinda, Ek Villain are some examples of movies that went on to be hits, as most audiences were not aware of the original films. Also, lack of awareness meant that the quality of content delivered to the screens was substandard. Most Indian audiences had not seen good quality cinema that was made the world over. Hence, the lack of exposure meant that audiences were content with the low quality fare that was being delivered. This may also go on to explain why movies appreciated by critics fared poorly with audiences. Many may suggest that these movies were ahead of their time. Maybe they were. But that only goes on to prove that the tastes of Indian audiences had not developed yet. And when the tastes have not yet developed, will the producers take the risk of investing in a novel idea? That brings us to a final point: innovative thinking. It is a well-known fact in Bollywood that writers are paid peanuts in comparison to actors and directors. The story in most cases is ignored or is not relevant to the producers. And this stems from the fact that movies with good stories, even when they have stars in them, have fared poorly in comparison to a typical song dance routine that is repackaged and sold. Swades with Shah Rukh Khan, October with Varun Dhawan, 8x10 Tasveer with Akshay Kumar are notable examples of movies with a story that failed. And on the other side, we had movies such as Tees Maar Ha, Grand Masti, Dilwale, Jurwa 2, etc. do good business. In Hollywood, once a project is greenlit, a writer's room is created where writers get together to piece the ideas and create a coherent story. A movie is written for months or maybe years in advance, and the script goes through multiple revisions to arrive at the final product. But in India, most writing lacks a story and a plot. Even if a movie with a good story is picked up to be remade, the treatment is changed to suit the taste of the audience. Take for example Baghi 3's treatment of Vetai. With more money, producers want to go grand over content, and at times they sacrifice novelty for grandeur. Another point to look into is the ability of the industry to look outside familiar faces for talents who could redefine the storytelling process and the business of movies. If the industry only works with the same group of people, then innovation is limited. Famous stars should try to work with new actors and directors to ensure that good stories are told and new ideas are given a chance. This helps in the overall improvement of storytelling in the industry. While we understand that there are genuine issues with the way Indian movies are made, all hope is not yet lost. New directors such as Reema Kakti, Anurag Basu, Anurag Kashyap, Dibakar Banerjee, Anand L. Rai, just to name a few, are bringing about a change in the way films are made. These directors are also producing movies with novel ideas which are made by first-time directors. With the recent exposure and globalization of international cinema and television, Indian audiences are introduced to amazing content which is available at their fingertips. With OTT platform changing the way we consume content, good quality available to the audience here is changing the kind of movies and shows they watch. The recent rejection of movies such as Thugs of Hindostan, Jab Harry Met Sejal, Tube Light, which were big movie vehicles, go on to say that the Indian audience is maturing and is in a position to accept or reject content. The recent successes of movies such as Stree, Badhai Ho, Newton, just to name a few, go on to validate that the audience is open to newer ideas now than they were earlier. This gives hope to many aspiring filmmakers and storytellers. Also, with stars experimenting with new talent, we can only hope for a positive change in the direction of movie making. Drishyam Films, an indie film unit, has gone ahead to produce some groundbreaking content such as Aakho Dekhi, Masaan, Waiting, Dhanak, Karvi Hawa, Newton, and the recently released Kamyab to critical acclaim. Even when the initial set of movies did not make much money, Manish Mundra, the founder of Drishyam Films, continued to put his money in smaller stories which would one day change the way Indian cinema is made and viewed. While we need more producers such as him, the next few years will perhaps change the way content is made in the industry. If you like the video, please subscribe to our channel. Click on the bell icon to get notifications.